I was very close to Bob Rath. We both understood how important the settlement was to the community and often reflected it wouldn't take much to find at least one drop of Palama blood flowing through the veins of everyone in Hawaii.
My grandfather, James Arthur Rath, who was the first head worker at Palama Settlement, was actually born and raised in India, and 4 generations of his family had lived in India, and many of them were in medical fields, but he had an interest in social work even as a very young man. So he came to the United States for that purpose. When he finished his studies, he had met my grandmother, who was a school teacher, and they were married, and he found that there was no job to go back to in India, and that's when Philip Jones came from Palama Chapel, which was at that time part of Central Union Church, and recruited my grandfather to come to the beautiful Hawaiian Islands to become social workers.
We wondered whether it would be possible for a malihine to do anything in Hawaii. This feeling soon gave way to one of friendliness and confidence, and it was not long before we had the more encouraging title, Kama'aina.
They just moved right in and were completely unafraid. My grandmother would knock on doors to talk to people and ask what they needed. There wasn't a whole lot of market research in 1905, so they would just go out and ask, the community members, what do you need?
The philosophy of social work at that time, of settlement houses at that time, was you were a settler. You lived in the area you were working.
They were obviously the ones who needed help the most. And so the help followed them, but rather than dictating from the outside, or trying to figure out from the outside what they needed, the settlement house people actually lived and worked in the area.
My father was the youngest of the 5 Rath children, and it was a very interesting way to be brought up, because you played with all the kids in the neighborhood, and of course social workers then as now didn't have a lot of money, and so you probably didn't have, my dad didn't have 2 roller skates, he had 1 roller skate, and he was pretty much like all the kids around him, but he did go to Punahou. And so he said that he used to go and hide his books as he took the what did they call it, the trolley, to Punahou. And then when he came back to the neighborhood, he would get off at a stop earlier so that he would walk back home, but nobody would necessarily know that he'd gone to Punahou.
We became friends with those among whom we lived. The first feeling of suspicion gave way to one of curiosity, which in turn lost itself in confidence and friendship.
I do not use the term lightly when I say that my grandfather was a visionary. And he did have frustrations and difficulties trying to raise money, but he always did it. It's amazing what he built up here. What Palama Settlement did for the health care of this city was amazing, nothing short of amazing.
The philosophy is that you see a need and then you try to fill it. And the need was health.
But the nurses did baby care. They taught the mothers how to care for their infants and their toddlers. And suddenly there was medical care there, and this was long before the city or the state took any role in medical care. I had only the knowledge of Palama of what I had heard from my father, and of course he talked about it a great deal because he was born and raised here and it was a critical part of his life. But since I've been more actively involved with Palama, I have really come to realize that this place is unique. There isn't any place else on any of our islands that is like Palama Settlement. And for those who have been touched by it and benefited from its services, I would really hope that they would remember and come back.
What Palama Settlement has meant to hundreds of boys and girls is impossible of telling. It will have to be judged by its results in the lives of those it has touched.